Welcome to Poor Choices Wine Edition. This is Poor Choices Wine Edition. So this just happened to one of my family members. Somebody tried to give them a rather experienced wine and immediately they just did not like it, and I saw they were having a bad time. I stepped in and I said, here's what you should be having because I know why you're probably not liking this. I gave them a different wine and immediately I saw the difference in their face and they said, wow, this is actually much better. And I thought to myself, I'm not the best, I'm probably an intermediate wine drinker at best, but what I am good at, I know flavor profiles and I know palates and I know how to get people into the right things. It's time to get you into wine the correct way. Here's my personal roadmap of how I got into it. When you start to drink wine, the very first things that you're gonna hear, and it's very common from pretty much everywhere across the board, they're gonna tell you that you wanna start looking at the wine and holding it to the side. The idea behind it is that you're looking at how thick the wine can be and just the color of it in general, but you can't taste color, so what does that matter? And ultimately, the real things that's more important is the smell and the taste, obviously. I didn't have any wine that I wanted to open because I actually want to do showcases of actual good bottles. This is just a really cheap wine, and it's mostly just to show you what you're supposed to do with it. So, as I mentioned, color, you'll see people doing this. And what you're looking for is just to see the color. It's going to be a little bit lighter on the sides, thicker on the inside. And you just want to see the boldness of it. Again, you can't taste color, so ultimately, really, who cares? It's just if you want to do it the proper way. Next thing is going to be swirling. You'll see people doing this. I personally really like the on the table touch. And you should be looking at something very similar to this. Should not be swishing around or hitting anything. You're not trying to make thunderstorm waves. You're trying to make really nice, gentle waves, make it look really pretty like that. And the idea behind it is that you're opening up the wine and helping it breathe so that you can get more flavors out of it. This is a very common expression. You hear people saying opening it up, aerating it. They even have these things called decanters, which is where you can put it in a big glass and really do it at a max level. But these are usually for more expensive bottles. So if it's a cheap wine or it's something you picked up off the store shelf, a couple quick swirls should be good. Ultimately, the recommendation is about 10 minutes of the bottle being open and aerated. For most red wines, you'll hear that very commonly, but it just really depends on your own flavor. Ultimately, it's going to be the taste. Really, that's all that really matters. If you like what you're tasting, you're going to keep buying it. So idea is very similar to a lot of other things. Oh shit, I almost dropped it. The idea is that you're essentially trying to taste really the way you would mostly everything else, but the key to these is that you'll see a lot of people often opening their mouth and letting air in. I'm gonna do the sound here, even though this is gonna be kind of cringy, but so if you heard what I was doing, it's actually letting air into my mouth, and I'm basically causing this swirl so that I can actually open up the wine while it's also in my mouth. But again, you can just simply do this and you'll be fine. So besides this, the actual drinking of the wine and enjoying the wine, realistically, if you've had really bad experiences with wine, unfortunately, the best way to get into something is to try as many as you can. Really drink as many different wines as you can, and you want to get a good variety. You want to get some sweet wines, some white wines, red wines, bolder wines, dessert wines. And the purpose of that is that you want to try to see what it is that you like. If you like something with a bolder flavor and you like something that's a little bit more dry, then you might already be ready to just start drinking a lot heavier stuff, and you might not necessarily like the sweet stuff. This is what I did, and this is how I got into wine, and I found that it's the least aggressive way to do it, and it's actually makes it very simple. So number one thing you should be doing, first wine everybody should have, just go get a Stella Rosa off the shelf. If you don't like that stuff, you're not gonna like wine more than likely. So you might like some drier stuff, but sweet wines, that's how I got into this. I ended up going to a winery and they had a lot of sweet wines and they were not overly sugary. They actually just tasted kind of like juice, and that's how I got into it. What happens is your palate starts to begin to understand what that dryness is, because it still has those flavors that are in the wine. So your palate will naturally just emerge into wanting to get something potentially a little bit drier. Or if not, you might simply look like sweet wines. Go ahead. Hey, drink a Moscato. It's probably amongst my favorite sweet wines that I still drink today. Another tip that I can give you is to try some sparkling wines. Sparkling wines are really good because they can kind of resemble the bubbles that you would get like from, say, soda, and some people just enjoy that flavor, and you might be able to enjoy the wine just simply because it has carbonation. The reason why I'm giving it to you this way is this is actually how I got everyone that I personally know that didn't like any wine, and it's a lot of people, to actually start liking wine, is because I started bringing the bottles that I would bring back that were sweet, giving them to all my family and friends, and then they slowly got into wine, and you actually got to see the transition from them not liking wine to getting into the drier stuff coming up next, which is basically going into white wines. So white wines are amazing. I love white wines. Till this date, I can drink my favorite, which is a Sauvignon Blanc. I think it's the best white wine available. However, if you're just getting into white wines, you might still want to get into the ones that are just getting up into the dry section. So you might want to stick with something like a Riesling, or something called, I'm probably going to screw it all up, a Gewürztraminer or something like that, some German wine. Director, help me out, put the name right here. Look it up, it's good stuff. They tend to be a little bit sweet, just like Rieslings, and this is pretty common. There's actually other ones, but I don't want to go into a whole barrage of different wines you should be getting into. These are just ones that I personally like. Once you get into those, then you can step into things like Chardonnay, or like I said, my personal favorite, which is the Sauvignon Blanc. So those are great white wines to try because they're going to get you a little bit of that dryness that you might start looking at into those red wines. So once you get into white wines, it's going to make it a lot easier for you to take that next step up, and that's going to be into the red wines. Before we talk about red wines, we're gonna talk about two very important things. Number one is what you saw me do earlier when we were actually pouring this bottle, and I said that you need to aerate it. Red wines, above all, these are the ones that need the actual air. They need help breathing or opening up. What I mean by breathing, opening up, is that you're gonna be able to get more flavors out of it. Whereas if you tried it right now, it only tastes like, say, prune. You open it up and all of a sudden you're getting grape and some spices and different things. So, and it does help a lot, and you'll enjoy the wine a lot more when it's actually opened up. Now, the most important thing you need to understand about red wine is something called tannins. Tannins are found in all wines, white wines as well, and it's basically the dryness, and it's what's commonly known to most people as cottonmouth. The reason why a lot of people don't like it, including my wife, is that when you're drinking wine, your mouth actually gets really dry, which is kind of weird because when you're drinking water, it's such a refreshing thing. You're drinking wine, you're getting a complete polar opposite, depending on how many tannins are in it. Tannins are really great for one thing, which is for palate resetting, which is why you usually see people having wine with their meals, because sometimes the sauce is a little heavy and it gets a little bit challenging to keep having the same sauce over and over. So you take a sip of your wine and actually resets your palate because of that cotton mouth. You go back to the sauce and all of a sudden it tastes better again. So keep in mind that these are not necessarily bad things. It's just that it does take a little while to get used to these. Again, tannins are the most important thing that we're going to be talking about here. So with that lead up, we're going to go into the first type of red wines. So when you're first getting into red wines, my personal favorites that I started getting into when I first got into them that are non-aggressive and don't have a lot of tannins are things like Grenache, Sangiovese, or a Malbec. Those are three of my favorites. I'm sure there's more, but again, I'm trying to give you my roadmap, and those three are phenomenal wines. I find that I genuinely like those, or generally like those, regardless of where I get them from. So remember, these are going to be for your first experience for red wine. These are going to be what I would consider your first step to getting into the stuff that has a little bit more tannins or a little bit more drier. Right after that, you might want to get into the next thing, which would be like things that have a little bit of spices or a little bit more boldness to them, which are going to be things like Pinot Noirs, or Syrahs / Petit Syrah as well, because it's a slightly different grape. And those are going to be your next step up because they're going to be much bolder, and those start to have a lot more dryness, and it's a good way to get from red wines that just taste mostly like fruit to some that start to taste a little bit drier. And then once you feel that you're truly ready, we're going to go into the final ones, which are going to be things like Merlots or Cabernet Sauvignons. And if you can get to a Cabernet Sauvignon, 99 times out of 100, that thing is just going to be extremely just cotton mouth and a lot of tannins. These just tend to be very, very bold wines, at least all the ones that I've had. Somebody feel free to correct me in the comments. Tell me what a jackass I am. That's always great as well. As I mentioned, I'm not a professional at wine drinking, but I am going to try to make it fun for you. All right, so now you've built up a little bit of confidence and you're ready to venture out. First thing you want to do is plan a trip to the wineries. And this is going to be local to whatever a winery area you live next to. I personally live next to Santa Ynez Valley, which is where I tend to go very often. So Santa Ynez Valley is home to Solvang, which is one of my favorite cities in the world. I often go there at least 3-4 times a year. And when I go out to wineries, the one thing that I've always experienced that either makes or breaks a winery for me is the staff and the server. So when you first get there, it's very intimidating when you first start off drinking wine because you feel like you don't know anything. And also you're probably gonna mispronounce everything. I can't tell you how long it took me to remember a couple of these names. I still messed up the German one earlier that the director's helping me out. We had to look up how to pronounce it and definitely I messed it up. So when you have a server who's friendly, and my recommendation to you is to just tell them point blank, hey, I don't know anything about wine. I hate most wines. Tell them what kind of styles you're liking because you should be following step one already, which is drink as many wines as you can. Now you should have had at least 20, 30 wines and you have an idea of what kind of stuff you like. If you still don't like wine, then just tell them, hey, I still don't like wine. I've tried quite a bit of it. What would you recommend for me? The server's friendliness is going to make a big difference because they're going to try to give you something that's more palatable. And if somebody is making you feel like, oh, you're not pronouncing this correctly, or is very snobby, which is probably the number one thing that I can't stand about the wine community is the snobbery. Unfortunately, you're gonna have a bad time. You're just not gonna want to give them your money, regardless if even if you find a wine that's phenomenal, you probably still won't want to be there because you can't stand the service. So the server will make or break for you, okay? The staff people, most of the time, are very friendly and very helpful, and they'll give you some idea of where to go. And they'll start recommending specific wines at their place, and they might even recommend other wineries that have wines that you might like that are similar to the ones that you're having at their winery. They're very friendly people, again, most of the time. If that server's snobby or you're getting the looking down nose, just get out of there. You're not gonna have a good time. So last thing I want to touch on, and this is very important, when you're first getting into wine, it's really important that you understand what grape you're enjoying. So I don't recommend for you to go with blended wines. Blended wines are amazing and they're phenomenal. And you might even like those more so right from the get-go. And the reason why is because they tend to have a lot more flavors and they're kind of bursting everywhere. So everything has a little bit more accentuation on the palate. So they're very enjoyable. The problem with drinking blended wines from the get-go, you have no idea what grape you're actually liking in there. And the thing is that that specific blend is going to create that specific flavor that's not going to be recreated by something else because they have to make that same blend. So keep that in mind that when you first start drinking wine, it's recommended for you to try single varietals. You want just a single flat grape that it actually, how does this taste? Do I like this grape? Then when you get to the blended stuff, it's really cool because you might say, hey, I really like Syrah, I really like Malbec, and I really like Sangiovese. And then somebody's gonna have a blend and you're like, I like all three of those, I want that. That's a perfect experience because then you can actually determine, oh, I really like how much the Grenache is popping or the Syrah is popping. And then you'll be able to enjoy it a little bit further because then you'll feel truly knowledgeable and you'll be able to taste exactly what you're supposed to taste. You could also just ignore that advice and go drink a blended wine that you already like and just start drinking what you like because this is Pour Choices. You know, you should always drink what you like. You know our motto here. So, but ultimately, just my personal advice, try to stick to the single varietals until you're at least very familiar with the names of what you're liking and then start moving into those blended wines. So that about wraps up our video for wine. If you can, help us out the channel, like, subscribe to our channel. And if there's a specific type of wine that you would like to know more about, just go ahead and drop it in the comments. I'd be more than glad to go over that wine with you. And if you want to correct all my pronunciations, feel free to do so as well. I definitely don't mind. I'm not a wine snob. I just like wine and I like drinking what I like. As always, you should drink what you like. All right, I'm gonna go grab a wine bottle from my cellar, all right?